Good evening. So, budget and economic survey, or economic survey and budget. Fine. So, in this session, no, in these sessions, fine, because it's lecture number 1, we are going to do the economic survey and budget in detail. Okay, and disclaimer: in this session, we are not going to focus on particular data. It will be more analytical in the nature, so that you can understand the nitty-gritties, the words or the concept they have used in the budget and economic survey. Okay, because these concepts, terminologies, they come in the exam, in the prelims. Fine, and they are very useful while writing answer in the mains. Okay, and if in the interview they are going to ask any question which is related to Indian economy performance, fine, then you are able to answer in the better manner. Fine. For example, right now interview is going on, and in the interview they are asking one question: do you think that the performance of Indian economy, is satisfactory in comparison to global headwinds? So there is one person in the board who is proper economist, fine, and he is using such a technical term. Do you think that? So now you should know about what Indian economy is performing. Then you should know how other economies are performing, fine, and what is the meaning of headwinds. So if you are able to decode these three terms, then you are able to answer this question. Fine. So economic survey and budget, they are very important for that particular year's exam, whether it is prelims or mains or interview. Budget, generally two things: announcements by the government regarding schemes and different sectors, and outlays, how much money government is going to spend at where. Whereas economic survey is going to explain what is Indian economy right now, past 2-3 years, how they are performing. So they compare the data. For example, if you will see this year's economic survey, they have used the data from 2021 onwards. 2021 onwards, they have used the data. 2021-22 financial year onwards, they are using the data. So if you will see any year's economic survey, they generally use 3 to 4 year data in order to explain how economy is performing. Fine. And while explaining those things or writing those things, they use many of the key terminologies. Okay, they use a lot of key terminologies, and these key terminologies are also asked in the exam in the different way. Sometimes they will make direct question on it. Sometimes, rather than making a question, these terminologies are used as a statement. Okay, so this is why what I thought that key budget and economic survey, we will discuss, analyze, but those terminologies which are used in the economic survey and budget, we will discuss in the class, and we will also do the questions on it. Primarily means first we will discuss chapter wise. Okay, chapter wise discussion of economic survey, and in that chapter each and every section will be taken, and in every section what terminology they have used, what analysis they have done, and on the basis what kind of the question can be formed. This is the way how we are going to do. Fine. Then once the chapter is completed, I will give you 3 questions on the basis of that chapter. That question may be asked in what? Mains examination. Fine. So this is how we are going to do economic survey. Same approach we will follow in what? Budget. Okay. But generally they do not ask direct question from the budget. According to the budget financial year 2025-2026, such kind of the probability of a question is never there. But they indirectly ask the question. For example, if you'll see in this year, government has mentioned Udan scheme. So Udan scheme was in the news. It was in the news. Fine. If you will see the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Civil Aviation, so they are keep working on it. And those things are published in the newspapers. But aspirants have thought that the aviation sector generally they do not focus. They will focus on what? Other infrastructure like railway, shipping, transportation, other means of transportation. They will not focus. But they have asked, and now you can see that how government is determined for the Udan scheme. Finance Minister have specifically mentioned, and they are saying that they are developing what? 100 airports. And why these things? If you will go back 2 years back, you will find that Air India and Indigo both have put the order of more than 500 planes. Fine, biggest order in the history of aviation. Both airlines from India. So it shows that the aviation sector is booming in India. So government support is required. Fine. So these are the things which you will understand retrospectively and prospectively. What we are going to discuss in this. Fine. Now, if you'll see the economic survey. Fine. So the system of presentation of economic survey was started during financial year 1951. Means 1950-51 financial year, they have started this practice of presenting what? Economic survey. But at that point of time, economic survey was presented along with what? Budget. So it is presented along with the budget. But later on, in 1964, they have changed this practice, and from 1964 onwards, this economic survey is presented 1 day in advance. Fine? It is presented 1 day in advance. And like we do follow the parliamentary system of government. So here ministers are responsible. Fine. But opting some other systems like presidential system, so country like India also opted certain post. For example, Chief Economic Advisor. Fine? Chief Economic Advisor. So this Chief Economic Advisor position is there, and this Chief Economic Advisor work very closely with Prime Minister's office plus Ministry of Finance, better called FinMin. Fine. And this Chief Economic Advisor, he worked with the Ministry of Finance, and through him, this survey is being prepared. So Mr. Nageshwaran is the Chief Economic Advisor. So economic survey is prepared by whom? Chief Economic Advisor. So it is prepared by Chief Economic Advisor. Even if you see the survey, fine, see the survey, so you will find his name mentioned there. Fine. So the ministry involved in the making of this what? Ministry involves in the making of this survey, but rather than role of minister, it is role played by whom? Economic Advisor. Fine. Economic Advisor who is not answerable to the parliament. He is not answerable to the parliament, but he prepares, and this is presented in the parliament by whom? Finance Minister. So maybe he is not directly answerable to the parliament, but because this economic survey is presented by whom? It is presented by a finance minister, and that is why government have to answer if the question is being asked. Fine. So economic survey, and after economic survey, what will happen? Then the next day, budget will be presented. And these happen in which session? Budget session, and the first session of a year. Fine. So budget session is the first session of that year. Okay. And what happens when the first session of year starts? It starts with what? Joint address of President. So President will be the jointly address the Parliament, and he is going to explain the priorities of his government. His speech is prepared by whom? His speech or her speech is prepared by the government. And once her speech is over, then economic survey, budget, and discussion on what? Discussion on president's speech, and then discussion on what? Budget. Fine. And this budget discussion is going to be completed. This budget discussion is going to be completed before ending of financial year. Fine. So in this session, this is a very important session from the point of view of what? From the point of view of government. Okay. Because government is going to present all of its expectations and reality, what they are going to do and how they are going to do in the financial year. Now, if you'll see this year's survey, okay, so this year's survey is divided into 13 chapters. Before 2017, there was a practice of presenting the survey into two parts, part A and part B. But then they stopped this practice of part A and part B, means they present in two volumes, part A, that is volume 1 and volume 2. Now they are presenting the survey in one volume and somewhere around 13 to 14 chapter. Okay, many of the aspirants told me that somebody suggested them to read the survey of at least 3 years. I said, beta, just read 1 year, that is sufficient for you. Even it is almost going to be impossible for you to read the survey. How many pages? 442. 442 pages of 1 year multiplied by 3. How much? More than enough for you. Right? So survey of 3 years is not required. Why? I have a logic for this. You should read that year's survey if you have a time. Fine. If you have a time, condition applied. If you have a time, then read that year's survey. And focusing on data and facts, more focus on what analysis they have given. That will enhance your understanding. Focus on the terminology they have used. Again, that will enhance your understanding. But if you will be trapped in the data and facts, every page have at least 10 to 15 data and facts. Charts and diagrams is also there. So if you will focus on that, then it will be very difficult for you. But if you will eliminate those data, facts, too much things, then it will be somewhere around 150 to 170 pages, which you can read. Okay. And it is more useful. Fine. If you already have a knowledge of subject, then it is more useful. But if you do not have a knowledge of the subject, basic understanding, then you should keep certain book or material along with yourself in order to understand. Fine. Now, if you will see a survey of every year. So every year survey, chapter number 1 starts with state of economy. Okay. It starts with state of economy. And this state of economy is basically divided into 3 parts. Okay, state of economy at global level. Fine. Then at union level, and then at state government level. Fine. So this global level means what is happening in the economy around the world. Fine. And you know that what is happening right now everywhere. Who is in the news? Donald Trump is in the news. Mr. Donald is in the news. Fine. Not Uncle Donald. Donald Trump is in the news. Fine. So Donald Trump is in the news. Why? Because he's putting the tariff, creating a panic, and then he's saying that, hold on. What is doing? Putting the tariff, creating a panic, hold on. Market is going to down, up, and again down. Fine. So this one thing is happening. Russia-Ukraine war is still not over. Fine. Though there is a truce between Hamas and Israel. But for how long? Because they have a history. To sign a peace, then one party is going to what? Put something, and then again short-term war, then again peace, war and peace. So this is about to happen again and again. And because that is most volatile region of the world, and that region is also rich of what? Mineral resources, especially what? Oil. So that is why any problem in that region is going to severely impact economy. Fine. World has not completely come out of COVID related problem. Why? COVID is over, but COVID has created a supply chain disruption. So this supply chain disruption is still not over. Fine, it is still not over. And the impact of supply chain crisis. Fine, impact of supply chain crisis is creating a lot of problem everywhere. And during COVID, what happened? Economic activities went down. And in order to rebound the economy, most of the countries, they have given what? They have given monetary stimulus. Government, see, because of COVID, lockdown happened. And lockdown created what? Demand decreased. And in order to pump the demand, government through central banks started putting money in the economy. So this money supply is being increased in order to what? In order to make economy recover. In order to boost the demand. Money supply will be increased, and increased money supply will boost what? Demand. It will boost demand. Demand will trigger what? Supply. This is what people thought that. What they thought that, okay, what is happening? COVID, lockdown. So when lockdown will open, people are facing demand related issues. What we will do? We will increase the supply of money. Money will trigger what? Demand. And demand will trigger what? Supply. So money triggered the demand. Money triggered the demand. But there is a supply chain disruption. And why supply chain disruption? Supply chain disruption mainly attributed to whom? China. Because China is what's global manufacturing hub. Fine. So China went for strict COVID related norms. So supply chain in the China was initiated little bit later. And because of globalization, even China is a manufacturing hub. But China is also taking something from nearby regions. And if any component or any part is unavailable, then main manufacturing line will not work. Fine. So China is getting raw material from some country. Fine. So after getting the raw material, they are doing the production. So imagine if there is an issue in the raw material side, then China will not produce. Suppose there is no issue at the raw material side, but where is the issue? At the China there is an issue. Now suppose China have no issues, but once the product is manufactured at China, it need to be moved to the Europe or their destination by flying? No, by sailing through the sea lanes. And that need what? Containers and ships. But because of the huge backlog, container and ships are there. Means one container start moving from India towards where? China. So they will get an entry in the Chinese port after 3 months. It start today, it will reach to China in next 10 days. But it will get an entry in the port after 3 months. So this is what happened immediately after the COVID. And this is the whole picture of supply chain disruption. So supply chain disruption doesn't only mean that it is happening only because China is not producing. China starts production. But because of the shipping constraints, fine, logistic constraints are also happening. So see what happened. Demand is increased, but supply is not able to increase. Then what came? High inflation. Fine, high inflation starts rising in subcontinent like India, Europe, and US. Fine. So this high inflation has created a pressure on the government as well as central bank to tame down what? Inflation. Now, if you want to tame the inflation, that means you have to decrease what? Money supply. If you will decrease the money supply, what will decrease? Demand will decrease and GDP will also. Every country have to fight at two ends. One, try to pace what? GDP, but at the same time you have to try to control what? Inflation. Fine. So this is a problem what entire world is facing. Fine, entire world is facing. But there are certain countries who are key factor here. Fine. Two key factors here. One is US and other is what? China. Donald Trump versus Xi Jinping. Fine. So US, why US? Because almost 79% of world trade is happening in which currency? Dollar. Fine. So any change in the USA's economy, availability of dollar, it is going to severely impact what? Entire world economy. And US is one of the world's largest consumer country. Fine. One of the world's largest consumer country. So they consume a lot. And China produce a lot. Fine. So their currency is a dominant currency. Plus they are also a center of global demand. Especially when we talk about what? Services. Fine. Whereas China is a hub of what? Manufacturing. They are a hub of what? Manufacturing. So these two economies are key. If you see that in the context of India, fine, Chinese economy is not visibly impacting Indian economy too much. If you read the newspaper, magazines and all, you will not find too much impact of Chinese economy on Indian economy. But you will find lot of articles are written in comparison to what? US economy and Indian economy. Impact of US economy on what? Indian economy. But I have a question for you. What do you think? Who is the largest trading partner of India? China. India's largest export goes to which country? US. And top three countries? Export. India's export. Export by quantity. See the data and you will find the country which? China. Though there is a huge gap between what? Export and import to China. But China is still a very important destination for what? India's export. And whenever there is a talk between India and China regarding the trade imbalance is an issue. India and China trade reaching to $200 billion. Fine. But out of that $200 billion, more than $100 billion is imported by whom? India. And somewhere around $60 to $70 billion is exported by India to whom? China. But still, that $60-70 billion is a huge amount for a country like whom? India. So Chinese economy also impact. And whatever we are manufacturing here, for example, yesterday I was reading an article regarding solar industry in India. So the solar energy is a key for clean energy, but all solar industry in India is dependent only on whom? China for the raw material supply. So even if you want to export, fine, even if you want to export from India to any other country, but if there is a supply chain disruption at China, your exports is going to be what? Get impacted. So what I mean to say here is, if there is any issue in the Chinese economy, India's export is also going to be get impacted. Fine, because still, for example, iPhone manufacturing came to where? India. But still, lot of things are still coming from where? China. Okay, so in this context, China is an important country. And what happened? If you'll see in the recent time, Chinese economy starts slowing down. The demand is not rising there. And their